How's it, Jeff? So in today's video, we are going to be repairing our AC or air conditioning compressor or system in one of our vehicles. We're going to replace the clutch, the pulley and the coil assembly on the compressor itself. We'll also have a look at some troubleshooting and some possible tips and tricks that you guys can go through when trying to fix or repair your system. Welcome back to the Burton Builds Garage. Let's get started. First up is to do some troubleshooting. Now, of course, you guys will know that your system is not working because it's not getting cold, and that's why you're actually doing this repair. So possibly the fuse is blown. Go check your AC fuse. If that's not blown, then move on to the next thing. You could also have a bad earth or maybe a broken wire. Now, the way this clutch system works, here's a new clutch setup. It's got electronic or electromagnet in it, which needs a 12-volt signal. So if you've got a broken wire and that 12-volt signal is not getting to it, then it's not going to engage the compressor. If there's no broken wires, you could also be low on gas. The system has got a pressure switch, and if there's not enough pressure in the system, it won't let the compressor engage. It won't send that 12-volt signal to the whole clutch setup. Likely, none of these is going to be the case. Most failures happen with a fuse, or it's a mechanical failure. So either the clutch or the pulley bearing or the electromagnet, that's this bit in the end, those things fail, and generally that's what we've got to repair. That's what has happened in our case, and that's what we're going to repair today. Also, the vehicle that we are working on is a 2006 model Toyota Hilux. It's a 2.7 VVTi, although this type of repair will carry over to basically any vehicle. The same principles will apply, and you've just got to sort of adapt them to your vehicle. Also, if you aren't sure, just check maybe the service manual. A quick Google search will definitely fill in the gaps if there are any. If you found the video useful, please give it a thumbs up. It really does help. Let us know in the comments section what you think. Maybe you've got some tips and tricks that you guys want to share for these types of repairs. So I basically did all of the troubleshooting. I checked the fuse, it's not blown. I checked for 12 volts, it was all there. Checked the system pressure, plenty of pressure in the system. So it had to be a mechanical failure. So what I ended up doing, just visually on the outside, nothing looked wrong. So I unbolted, unplugged and unscrewed here the coil that's at the compressor, and basically a quick test is you can take your multimeter, set it to ohms, and you can measure between the two wires here. We should measure between 1 and 4 ohms, I believe, could be 5 ohms. Mine is measuring open circuit, so the coil is burnt out. Now, the coil is this section over here. It's behind the actual pulley itself, and I thought it was important to show you guys this before you actually do the repair. Now, this coil, I mean, it's very easy. Okay, great, we go out, we get a new coil, we remove the old coil, and we put in a new coil. We put on all the old parts again, and then after a couple of thousand kilometers, it burns out once again. So why did it fail in the first place? Well, this is what I wanted to show you. Obviously, these clutches work quite a lot. They engage and disengage as you drive your vehicle, or as you turn the aircon on and off. And from what I believe, I may be wrong, but I think this is what's happened. The clutch, the clutch normally grips onto our pulley, and when this thing slips, it gets really hot, it overheats, and that heat is then transferred into the coil, which then damages the coil's windings. There's also a small diode in here. It's probably also damaged that. The coil goes open circuit and it doesn't work anymore. The reason I think that's happened is if we look on the inside of our clutch plate here, there's little rubber inserts that take up some of the shock. Those rubber inserts have slightly melted. Also, if we have a look at the mating surface here, the friction surface, the steel has actually gone blue, which indicates that it's got really, really hot. If we have a look at the inside of our pulley, there's normally like a freshly painted surface in there. That paint is actually bubbled off, and looking really closely at the steel, there's some straw coloring, some blue coloring. So also that has got really, really hot, and as I mentioned, probably transferred into the coil and damaged the coil. So this is why I say you don't necessarily just want to replace the coil and put the old parts back in. The clutch will likely slip again, and it will prematurely fail once again. So we'll take all of those old parts, we can actually just set them aside, and this is the new kit that you get. It comes with a new coil, a new pulley, and a new clutch plate. Now there are also some small circlips that you get, and you know, we'll also install those, but it's not too important, we'll see them later. The key thing here is if we have a look at the clutch, if we take our clutch and we put it onto the center of our pulley, we push down and we try and turn it, there's a lot of friction force that is locking these two things together. If we have a look at the old one and we do the same thing, take our clutch and push it on there, there's basically no friction here. So this part is definitely worn. Quite simple to install this. We are just going to remove the old one and install the new one. So let's get into that. So as you can clearly see, everything has already been removed. Now, of course, this wouldn't be a step-by-step guide if we didn't have the complete step-by-step removal process, but I've done it this way just to show you guys what you are working with, because this is quite a tight space and you can't really see when it's all assembled and exactly how it comes apart. So bear with me, and once we install all of this, when you want to remove it or disassemble it, it's the exact reverse operation that you're going to follow. Now, I want to point out a few things. This is our compressor, and there's a groove over here for a circlip, and there's a groove over there for a circlip. Now, as we saw previously, there's a coil and a pulley and then a front clutch plate. Those are all held into position. Here is our coil. Now, this coil goes on to the front of our pulley like that, and it's held in position by a circlip. Here's our circlip. Now that circlip, of course, goes into that little groove, but we'll put our coil on first, and then the circlip is seated into the groove, and then this coil is held in position. Now, as I said, it's quite difficult to see because it's quite a tight spot here, and that's why I'm showing it to you like this. Something that you do need to note, that the back of the coil, there's a little tab or a little nub over here that locates in a small recess on the front of the compressor, and that is so that when this whole load is energized, the coil stays in one position and it doesn't rotate. It also ensures that the wires are positioned correctly into the relief here on the front of the compressor. So what we would end up doing is, and I'll show you guys this a little bit later, or at least I'm going to try and show you, is that we'll install our coil just like that, and then we will snap our circlip or our snap ring back into place. There's an important thing about these circlips. Stick around for that. You do not want to miss that out. You'll really battle if you don't stick around for that. So that will go on once that is locked into place. Now, of course, I haven't clipped it in properly. I'm just trying to loosely show you guys. Then the next thing is our pulley. Now, the pulley has got a front face. You can see it's got like a clutch type of face. It's very similar to the flywheel on the back of your motor. That and the bearing basically here, we've got our bearing, and that's going to go onto this part of the compressor. So we would slide that on all the way. Now you might have to slide it on, and you might see this later where we've got to bump it on with a bit of a rubber mallet. Let me just take it off for now though. So we'll slide that on all the way. And then we have another circlip. So this circlip goes into this little recess right here. So we'll slide that coil, or we'll slide that pulley on, and then we'll clip this circlip back in place, and then our coil and our pulley is locked into position. Once that is done, then we will take our clutch, the clutch face. Now, you're not just going to slide this directly on like that and bolt it up with a little 10mm bolt. Well, it's 10 mils on my compressor. It might be slightly different on yours. There is a very important factor, or a very important thing you mustn't forget, and that is a little shim or a washer that goes inside this little hole. So if you leave that out and you just push the clutch plate on and you bolt this up, it's basically going to lock the clutch plate to the pulley, and there's going to be no gap, and it's going to be locked together. When you put that little shim in, or that washer in here, and then you bolt it up nice and tight, then it leaves a little bit of a gap here, probably about 0.5 millimeters, 0.02 inches of gap between the clutch plate and what will be over here. We'll have a look at that later, is the pulley, and then it's free spinning, and then it only engages once you push the aircon button and the electromagnetic clutch or the electromagnetic coil pulls the whole lot together. So I'll try and show you that later. But as I say, just bear with me. I just did it like this so that you guys can see what's happening in this very tight space. Looking at it from a slightly different angle here, once we install our coil, now of course you'll install the coil first, and we did look at that previously. Before you install anything else, we can take the ground wire and then we'll screw it onto this little screw point over here. You can also see there's a cable clamp or cable stay there. Then the positive wire or the signal wire, you'll feed that through the cable stay and then clip it in. I'm not sure if you guys can actually see this. Maybe you just can get it in frame there. You'll clip it into its little housing, and then the wiring loom plugs into that. So you might want to do this before you actually install the rest of the clutch and the pulley, so that you've got better access. So getting back to that step-by-step guide, of course, the first thing is always to remove everything. Now, it's quite a simple process. All we need to normally do, well, in this case, is remove the belt. Once we've removed the belt, then we can actually remove the whole clutch setup that is normally over there. But in order to do this, we need working space. Now, there is a little bit of working space between the motor and when the radiator and the fan and the shroud are all installed here. Just take it from me, it's not enough working space to get the job done. So what I'm going to recommend you do is just to drain the radiator. Now my radiator has got a little drain point on the bottom, drained it into a bucket. There's the bucket over there. So I'm keeping that, and I'm going to reuse that antifreeze or that coolant. So drain it into a bucket, keep it nice and clean, and then we'll remove the fan, which is normally over here. There's our fan, and there's our fan shroud, so we'll remove that, and there is the radiator hiding behind the tripod. So we'll remove that, all of that stuff from the front of the vehicle, and that leaves us with a whole lot of space to work in. Now that we've got that space, we can now remove this whole assembly. So the first thing we wanted to do, let's see if we can get a bit brighter up or down there. There's not much light down here. The first thing we wanted to do was to remove our nut on the front here of our clutch pulley. Then we will pull this clutch off, and then we'll remove the first circlip. Now you guys have already seen this already. You will remove the first circlip, then we'll remove the pulley, and then we'll remove the second circlip, and then we'll remove the coil. Also, before you remove the coil, remember to unclip the positive wire, the 12-volt signal lead, and to unscrew the ground lead over here. I'm just breezing through this because all you can do is watch the assembly and then refer, basically just watch the assembly in reverse, or follow it in the reverse, not orientation, but the reverse order, and that's how you'll take everything apart. So something important to remember when we are reinstalling our circlips is that they do actually have an orientation. Now, you can't really see it here. I'm going to try and insert a photo, but on the one side of our circlip, either this one or this one, there's a chamfered edge. So there's an angle on the edge there, and there's an angle on the edge here. And if we turn both of them over, if we look at this edge, it's a very squared edge. So it's square and then square down. Same here, square and square down. So if we turn them back over and get that chamfered side, you can see it's square, then there's probably a 30-degree angle, and then it goes down. This chamfered edge, or this edge with the angle on, you want to install this facing outward, facing towards the front of the car on both of these circlips. Just remember that when you are clipping them back in to your coil and to secure the pulley. So the first bit of the assembly is to install the coil. Remember, our locator here needs to locate in the little recess on the compressor, and it needs to seat up nice and flush. And there we go, nice and flush. Cables are coming out the back in the little relief, and now comes the tricky bit of installing the circlip. Remember, chamfered side facing the radiator or facing out. There we go. I'm not sure if you could hear that. You probably couldn't. It was a very, very faint click, and that means now the circlip has seated in its small recess. What I suggest you do, it's going to be quite tricky for me to do here, but it's to put a mirror kind of at the angle of my hand here, and then you can have a look inside there just to visually check that the circlip is seated. Next up is the pulley. Now you have to align this thing up pretty accurately. Of course, install it the correct way with the flat side or the clutch side facing outward. And as I said, you've got to line it up. You might have to wiggle it a little bit back and forth. It's quite a tight fit, and there we go. Slides on. Sometimes they can be a little tight. You might just have to use a rubber mallet or a plastic dead blow hammer just to lightly tap it on and make sure that it's home. Next up is the circlip, to install that, and then the clutch. Here's the circlip. Again, remember the chamfered side must face outward, and it is a little bit tricky, but I'm sure we'll be able to get it in. It's easier when you use two hands, but I don't want to block the camera view with my second hand. I might have to, sorry guys. There we go. You probably also didn't hear that, but there was a small click, and now that circlip is home. Our pulley is nice, firmly in position, and it's spinning without any noises or scraping or any bad stuff. Next up is the clutch that we need to install. Now, just remember, there's a little shim. It's basically a washer. This one is 0.8 millimeters thick, and we are going to install it on the inside of where our spline goes. So I'll just drop it in there now. Try and get this so that you guys can see it. I realize it's very small, but it is inside there. Come on, there we go. It's nice and flat now. And then just carefully tilt your clutch up and press it on. Now this clutch also should slide on easily. You shouldn't have to hammer it on or do anything. There we go. Just get it aligned nicely with the splines, and unfortunately you can, there we go. I was going to say our shim had fallen, but it didn't. And now we just need to bolt it up, and then we need to measure the gap, the air gap. Now I can already see that what we've got here, this shim, the 0.8 millimeter shim, is too small, because if I push on here, if I push on the clutch and try and move the pulley, it's already binding. So I'll have to put on a thicker shim. Now I've got another one that is, I think it's 1.2 millimeters thick. Hopefully that gives us enough clearance. So this is something that's important if you want to shim this correctly. I think it's between 0.5 and 0.89 millimeters, or 0.02 inches to 0.035 inches. If the gap is too big, then your clutch won't engage properly, or maybe if it does engage, it'll partially engage, start slipping, can overheat and burn out the coil, as we've already seen. Or if the gap is too small, then it might ride on you all the time, which is also going to cause excessive heat buildup and premature wear on these clutch or these mating surfaces. Cool, so here's the thicker one. 0.8 millimeters was the last one. This one's 1.2 millimeters thick. I know it's really difficult to see, but we'll pop it inside there. And again, carefully put our clutch on without it falling out. There we go. And let's have a look here. So this one also seems like it's a little bit too thin. It's much better though. If we push on the clutch, push on the center of the clutch and turn, you can see it's still binding up, but it's not binding up as much as what the previous one was. So I reckon let's stick on that other one, the 0.8 millimeter shim, and we'll see how that works. Cool, both shims now in, and hopefully this is going to work. It might be a little bit too much, but that's the whole point of this, trial and error. Definitely better. Still feels like it needs more though. So I've basically found that 3 millimeters worth of shims or washers actually give us the correct clearance, the clearance between these two faces of 0.5 millimeters. So getting back to putting it together, we can carefully align those splines up and then push the clutch on. So if we push on the center of the clutch here, we can see that our pulley freely rotates without binding. So all that we is left to do now is to put our 10 millimeter bolt back in, and we'll use a torque wrench. I think the spec is about 13 Newton meters. My torque wrench only goes as low as 20, so I guess we'll just give it 20. I'm sure that'll be fine. Just check your spec for your vehicle or the compressor pump, whatever the brand is that you're using. There will be a spec on the internet. They're roughly all about the same. 13 to 15 Newton meters for a 6 millimeter bolt. Also had to just whip up this little tool just to hold the center of the clutch here. Now you can buy little tools. I didn't have one, so I made up this funny end over there to remove the original one, and I've just made up these little ones to tighten this one up. Cool, looks like we are at 16.1 Newton meters. I reckon that's pretty good. Next up is to install the idler pulleys again. There's 3 of them, one over here, one over there, and one over there. Under normal circumstances, you don't have to remove these to work on the aircon compressor. Although while we are doing this job, it's a good thing to check the condition of those idler pulleys and the bearings, if they're running rough or if they're maybe dry. While you've got everything open here, it's really not a lot of extra effort to remove them and replace the bearings in those idler pulleys. There's another video out, I'll link it in the description, maybe I'll put a card up on the screen, go check that out, where I'll show you how to replace these bearings using basic tools. So we'll get those on quickly and then we'll carry on with the assembly. Cool, all done. Next up is to get the fan pulley bolted up again. So the pulley has just been slid onto the water pump there, and that pulley together with our fan will bolt up nice and flush. Now just remember, when you're putting this all back together, you want to make sure that all of those surfaces are clean, they don't have any gravel or dirt in them, because you want everything to pull up nice and flush so that there's no wobble when everything is bolted back together. There we go, seating quite nicely. Here's a little trick to tightening these nuts on here. There's 4 of them, and of course if we just try and tighten it, then the whole pulley assembly and the water pump wants to turn. So what you can do, if you don't have any special tools, you can use a large screwdriver and you actually hook it between the center hub and one of the nuts. So that's what I'm doing right there. I'm not sure if you guys can exactly see this, but that's what I'm busy doing. And then we'll tighten the one on the opposite side. So we'll nip it up, and then we'll turn it a little bit more. We'll go to the next nut, grip that one, nip up the next nut. Same thing, we'll go to the next one, put the screwdriver in there, nip up the next nut. Well, luckily there's only 4 of these. That's 3 done, and 1 more left. Now, if you guys know of any other little tips and tricks for tightening these nuts in the various different ways, let us know in the comments, and it's always nice to hear from you guys. And there we go. Those have all been nipped up now. They need to be tightened a little bit more. I'll do the same thing by using the screwdriver, and I'll go around once more, tighten them up, and then we are ready to put the fan belt back on. Cool, now to get our fan belt back on, V-belt, serpent belt, however you want to refer to it, basically all the same thing. There's only one of them, and we just have to weave it through all of the pulleys again. So I'm going to try and give you a view while I work. As I mentioned before, this is quite a tight spot to be working in. Hey man, it's going down the wrong gap. And anyway, we'll slowly work it into position. And once that's done, then we can start getting the radiator and the shroud back in, and then we can get to testing our little repair. Sometimes this can be a little bit tricky, so just take your time and don't nick the belt on anything, don't force it. You will be able to get it in the way it's supposed to go in if you just work slowly and steady. Can't actually remember how to put this belt on. Give me a second. Just had to go do a quick Google search. Couldn't remember how to put the belt back on. But as I said, just work carefully and don't force anything. And do a Google search if you do get lost, and you will find your find your way. You know, every now and again a blind squirrel does find a nut. So just got to work this around. I had it a little bit incorrect. Nevertheless, we do have it in place now, and I think we'll be good to go. So the only thing I've got to do now is to get it around our what is this thing called, the hydraulic pump for the power steering, and our tensioner here, we just got to put a number 14 spanner on and untension the tensioner, clip it on, and then we'll release it, and then it should be good to go. Just got to find a number 14 spanner now. Hang on. There we go. I've got a, well, maybe I can get it on another extension. There we go. Had a 14 socket lying around, so we should just be able to tension that on, rotate the tensioner, I think this way, I don't know. Yes, that way. Yep, I hope it doesn't jump off. A little bit more. The belt's going on, and there we go. And from what I can see, just checking that the belt is in all of the grooves before we release the tension. And now we can release the tension. And that's it. Belt is back on. The job is pretty much done. Just got to put in the radiator and the shroud, connect it up, put in water. Don't forget to put in water. And I'm sure it's going to be a job well done. Cool, so we'll just pop the shroud in now and move it out the way. Should be able to get the radiator in there. Just be careful when you do reinstall the radiator, and also when you are removing it, that you don't actually damage any of the fins. You don't want one repair job to turn into another repair job. So there we go. It's got little hooks that we'll just hook back into the body, just like that. And obviously we'll screw that in, and then we'll clip and screw our shroud back onto the radiator, and that should be almost done. Now this shroud has got little sort of teeth that clip in at the bottom of the radiator, so it's a little bit tricky, but you know, you guys will figure it out. There we go. Quite simple actually. 1, 2 bolts, and then 4 bolts on the radiator. Okay, radiator is now bolted in. Last thing to do, well, not last thing, but one of the very last things is to just bolt in the shroud again. Now, I'm also breezing over this a little bit because this is it's not a very technical part of the repair. So I'm sure you guys will be able to work it out, especially if you have uninstalled and removed everything already. If there are any questions, just let me know in the comments. I will try and answer them. I don't know everything. I only know what I know for the work that I've done. But yeah, at least some help is better than no help, eh? Don't forget to connect up all of your radiator hoses. There's one at the top here, one at the bottom there, and a little overflow breather pipe. Be quite funny if you start filling up your radiator and it all runs onto the floor. Well, maybe funny for the person watching, not funny for you actually doing the job. Just need to throw in some coolant. Now you'll have to trust me that I have put on the lower rad hose, and I've actually mostly filled the system already. I'm just going to top it off with a bit of Toyota super long life coolant here. Won't take that much more. By the way, I haven't started or tested anything. I'm just topping it off. There we go. I think that's full enough. Now it's time to test and see if all of our hard work has paid off. Awesome, everything seems like it is working. Aircon is on, and I don't know if you guys can actually feel this, but the air is nice and cold. So pretty stoked with the way that repair came out. Just remember, go take your vehicle for a test drive, let it get up to full operating temperature, check that there are no water leaks because you had the radiator out, and eventually when it has cooled down, check that you've got the proper level of coolant in your radiator. I mean, you don't want the thing to be overheating because of some stupid little mistake. Guys, that's it. If you found the video useful, please give it a thumbs up. Let us know in the comments what you think. Also, I haven't forgotten about it. You guys must stick around. We're going to be picking up on those vintage mini lawn tractor restorations, and man, I have got another one. It's probably like an early 60s model that we're going to potentially get running and see if it's worth restoring. Stick around for that. And my name is Burton. This is the Burton Builds Garage, and you guys will see me in the next video. Cheers.